The following podcast was recorded in front of a live streaming audience on Wednesday, June the 17th, 2026. This episode will also contain references to stories and characters that may cause sudden and uncontrollable feelings of nostalgic joy and wonder. Listener discretion is advised.
You know who you are? Steven is my name. Even Steven.
Will you say something, Steven?
Steven or else media.
You're listening to another G.I. Joe podcast, and this is episode number 4, Operation Wingfield. Hello and welcome to another G.I. Joe podcast, the podcast that recently started rewatching the cartoon from the 80s and now kind of wants to talk about that. You know, maybe at some point. Anyway, I'm your host. My name is Steven, and I don't think I have ever talked about how I got into G.I. Joe or the comics specifically, which, I don't know, seems weird. Feels like it's something I would have brought up in the episode number 0, but I didn't. So I'll talk about it right now.
I want the Joes on full alert. Cobra's up to something big.
So at some point after the launch of the comic, which was in March of 1982, but before September of 83, I had been seeing commercials for G.I. Joe on the TV. Now, these may have been commercials for the comic or commercials for the toys. I don't really remember. And honestly, it was probably both. All I can remember is that the commercials that I would see on TV had some really kick-ass animation sequences. And as the summer of 1983 was coming to a close, one of those commercials came on the TV while my mom was in the room with me. Now, my memory is like Swiss cheese. It's got a lot of holes in it. But I know that at some point during the summer of 1983, I watched that commercial with my mom because I know that I told her as we were watching the commercial when, I'll just say I was 11 years old, I told her that I loved the cartoon that was in the commercial and that I wished that they would make an entire cartoon show just like that. Well, a month or so later, our copy of the 1983 TV Guide Fall Preview issue arrived in the mail, and it was from that my life changed forever. See, on the afternoon of Saturday, September the 10th, 1983, I was out in the backyard. I'm playing, I'm running around, and I'm doing the kind of junk that an 11-year-old would do in small town Kansas. And suddenly my mom calls out to me through the kitchen window. She's in the kitchen. I'm in the backyard. She opens up the window. "Steven, my favorite of my 3 sons, you special, special boy, come on into the kitchen. I have something I want to show you." I don't remember if that's exactly what she said, but it was probably something like that. I'm a middle child. Anyway, she shows me the TV guide, and in the TV guide is an ad for a G.I. Joe Real American Hero week-long cartoon miniseries. 5 episodes, 30 minutes per episode, which includes commercials, and it was starting just that Monday, September the 12th, 1983. Needless to say, I tuned in and I was hooked. It would be, however, another 7 months before I started reading the comics. I was watching the cartoon, I was getting the toys, or my parents were getting the toys for me, so I was playing with the toys and watching the cartoon, but the comic book portion of it didn't come in till later.
Fools! You have allowed them to jeopardize my plan!
My dad, at the time, was a letter carrier in Lawrence, Kansas, and in April of 1984, he took me, along with my older brother and my younger brother, to this little shop he discovered just that week while he was covering another carrier's route in downtown Lawrence. It was a shop called Quality Comics, and it was there that I picked out my first ever comic book, and it was G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, number 25.
If anyone can stop Joe, it's Zartan!
Evil master of disguises, Zartan. There's no end to his surprises, Zartan. Zartan has an evil plan just for G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe, a real American hero, fighting a fiendish new foe.
Your plan is not working, Zartan!
Wrong, Commander. Watch.
Follow the further adventures of G.I. Joe and Marvel Comics.
I started getting the book monthly at that point because my parents, or my older brother, who was into comics, convince them to give each of us 2 subscriptions or a subscription to 2 Marvel comics each. And I chose G.I. Joe and Captain America. But yeah, that's how I got into G.I. Joe. How about you? Email me, gijoe@somanypodcast.com. That's G.I. Joe without any punctuation or spaces. Email me, and hey, maybe I'll read it out in a future episode.
Sorry to send for you without explanation, Duke, especially in the aftermath of Cobra's sneak attack. But I've got a real challenge for the G.I. Joe team.
Anyway, today we're looking at G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, issue number 4. This issue sports a cover date of October 1982, though it hit the shelves in July. It sold for just 60 cents, and it is entitled Operation Wingfield. Larry Hama is credited for providing the script, while Herb Trimpe handled the plotting and the pencils. John D'Agostino and Jack Abel did the inks. The letters were by Diana Albers, and the colorist was George Roussos. The Joes are alerted to the existence of an extreme paramilitary militia group in Montana led by a mustachioed fellow by the name of Commander Wingfield. The group may have ties to Cobra, and so the Joes decide to take a look. Hawk and Grunt go undercover as recruits, while Snake Eyes conducts super sneaky ninja reconnaissance. Snake Eyes discovers that the group has a B-29 Super Fortress bomber capable of nuclear deployment. He spies on Wingfield and his officers having a meeting, and they plan to use the bomber to drop a nuclear warhead on Vladivostok, which they hope will lead to World War III. They also have a second warhead that's buried beneath the camp that they can detonate as a backup plan in case the bombing of Vladivostok fails. Meanwhile, Hawk and Grunt investigate a warehouse and discover that Wingfield has T-60E tanks, likely provided to them by Cobra. They trigger an alarm and are overpowered by Wingfield's men. Wingfield, at that point, is forced to hasten his plan, and his right-hand man Carruthers suits up for flight. Snake Eyes radios for reinforcements, and they see the B-29 fly off. Hawk commandeers a jet fighter to go after it, but the radio doesn't work, and so left with no other choice, he shoots down the bomber and it crashes into the ocean. Grunt and Snake Eyes are about to engage Wingfield until they learn that he intends to use the families of his recruits as armed human shields. Wingfield's wife, Sherry, shoots him in the back just as he's about to shoot a recruit's wife. Sherry informs the Joes that her husband, Commander Wingfield, has activated a 10-minute timer on the nuclear warhead that's buried beneath them, and as the issue ends, Zap and Grunt work together to deactivate the bomb. All right, we will start, as always, with the cover. This cover was penciled by Bob Hall with inks by Al Milgram, and it is not one of my favorites. I really am not a big fan of the way Hawk is portrayed on the cover. Doesn't really look like Hawk. He's got a beret on, which I don't think I've ever seen Hawk wear a beret. Snake Eyes, the goggles over his eyes, the eyepieces are kind of slanted in a weird Spider-Man way. I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of it. It reminds me, if this was the 90s, it reminds me a lot of your average Rob Liefeld cover, because he did a lot of covers where you'd have the characters standing either posing or charging at you, and what they were standing on would be some kind of rounded bit of ground, whether it be metal or earth or stone or plastic or whatever. But that's what it kind of reminds me of. This is actually probably put together a bit better than a lot of those 90s Rob Liefeld covers. I don't want to take anything away from Liefeld, but yeah.
Unsubstantiated fantasy!
But yeah, I'm just not a fan of the cover. It's mainly because of Hawk. If you look at Hawk on the inside, when we get into the issue, his face, his head is longer. It's a bit more squat here on the cover. I don't know. It just rubs me the wrong way. I don't know why. Getting into the issue, we have our first page, which is a splash page, and we are greeted with a close-up of Commander Wingfield. He's holding an M16. He's got a hat on with the logo of their militia unit there on the hat. They're called Strike First. And he's got what I'm going to guess that they're aviator sunglasses And then he's got a curly Q handlebar mustache. He looks a bit silly, if you ask me. But on this opening page, he's yelling at his recruits. Listen up, troops. This is your weapon, nomenclature Mike 16, M16. You will learn to love it, but first, you will learn to respect it. Turn the page, and basically the camera has backed up. So now we see that Wingfield is addressing some recruits, and he commands them to run, what would we call that? A training maneuver, which really just involves them running across the line of targets on their gun range. So Wingfield and his right-hand man, Carruthers, and his wife, Sherry, they're standing back where you would stand if you were firing down the range for target practice. And so he's got all these recruits running perpendicular to the targets, and Wingfield starts to open fire on them. He's firing down by their feet, and Sherry and Carruthers, they're not all that happy with this little scheme of the Commander Vance Wingfield. That's his full name. I don't know about this, Vance. These recruits are too green. They've only been in training here for a week. Your wife's right, Commander Wingfield. Using live ammo at this stage is too dangerous. You're out of line, Carruthers. And Sherry, when I want your opinion, I'll ask for it. I'm not here to wet nurse a gaggle of panty wastes. And that's when he opens fire. During the exercise, he actually tags one. He shoots a guy in the back of his calf, basically. And the guy goes down, and Carruthers and Sherry run over to him to check and see if he's okay. And Carruthers announces that it looks like the bullet hit him square in the bone and shattered it, and that the guy needs a hospital. Vance Wingfield, on the other hand, he has no sympathy at all for this guy. I think the bone is shattered. He needs hospital treatment. No, he knew the risks when we joined us. He'll have to make do with the field dressing and some aspirin. So, yeah, nice guy. Nice guy. He wants his men tough. He wants them hard. He wants them ready for battle. So we turn the page and we find out that what we are watching is actually some footage, video footage that is being projected on a screen, and we are watching it along with the Joes, because suddenly Hawk stands up in front of the screen. He tells them to shut it down and turn the lights on. He's going to address the Joes. He explains to the Joes that what they just watched was video footage taken by the FBI during a surveillance mission of some sort, and the belief, well, General Flagg and the brass at the Pentagon, as Hawk calls them, they think that this militia group and Commander Wingfield are being secretly funded by international terrorists, possibly Cobra. And because of that, the Joes have to get involved. So they're going to send in 3 men. 2 of them will go undercover as recruits, and then the 3rd will just do reconnaissance. They'll hide in the perimeter, watch through the binoculars, make notes, that kind of stuff. Stalker asks Hawk who's going to be the decoy, basically who's going to be the 2 Joes that are going to go undercover. And Grunt is sitting next to him. Grunt says to him, "That's your specialty, Ranger. Besides, you enjoy camping out in the woods with furry animals." And that's when Hawk announces that Snake Eyes will be doing the reconnaissance, and the 2 men who are going in undercover will be himself, Hawk, and then Grunt. To which Stalker responds, "Have fun with them furry animals, Grunt." And then Grunt just simply responds with, "Nuts." I actually find this little scene here kind of interesting, because Grunt is joking that because Stalker is a ranger, he would be the one who would go undercover. That's what he does. But I kind of have a feeling that this militia group, Strike First, has no people of color within their ranks at all. And Stalker trying to join probably isn't going to get very far. So it makes sense that they wouldn't use Stalker. And they don't say it out loud, but if you read between the lines, I think that's what they were kind of going for there. I, of course, never... So sorry about that. I wanted to break in here real quick because I forgot about this one bit here that I just wanted to... I don't think I could let this episode go by without speaking about this little bit here. So Hawk has explained to the Joes that there is this militia group and that it's their responsibility because possibly Cobra could be funding them. And that's when, during this briefing, Clutch pipes up, "Well, they sound like a bunch of overgrown Boy Scouts playing soldier." And then Short Fuse pipes up with, "Hawk, you want us to go in, take away their guns, and spank them?" I just thought that was funny. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Doesn't really matter because now it's in the podcast. I, of course, never would have caught that had I been reading this as a small child when this came out. What did I say, 82? I'd have been 10. So, yeah. Turn the page. Page 4. We are now at the camp. Hawk and Grunt have just gotten off the bus with the other recruits. And Grunt is kind of unhappy. He tells Hawk, he's already been through basic training. He doesn't want to do it again. But they got to do what they got to do because they're Joes, right? They got to save the free world. That's what they're supposed to do. There's a couple of soldiers from Strike First helping everybody, telling them as they get off the bus where they're supposed to go. Commander Wingfield will address the new recruits at 1500 hours on the button, is what one guy tells them. Grunt points out that as they're getting off the bus, or as others are getting off the bus, he points out that some of the new recruits brought their wives and kids with them. And Hawk explains that Wingfield encourages that because, as he puts it, when you have power over a man's family, you have power over the man. So at 1500 hours, the new recruits line up. Commander Wingfield addresses them. He refers to them as fellow survivors. Fellow survivors, you have taken the first important step towards ensuring the continued existence of your families. I congratulate you. That's how he starts his speech. You may have felt that this first step, the relocation and the cutting of old ties, was difficult. Well, I assure you, the second step, your training, will be far more difficult. It must be to fully prepare you for that most horrible third step, the grim reality of survival after the total collapse of civilization. So they're basically posing as preppers, right? He acts as if he is forming this military unit in case or because there will be a total collapse of civilization as we know it. There will be some sort of apocalyptic event, and they will need to be prepared for that. And one of the things that they need to do to prepare is to become knowledgeable on weapons and tactics to defend their families and, frankly, defend the good old USA when the shit hits the fan. Another G.I. Joe podcast will return after these messages.
An heroic legacy beginning in 1941 that spans time, space, and the whole of the multiverse. Journey along with the Knights of the Stars. Ted, David, and Jack. They, along with Will Payton, Michael Thomas, Prince Gavin, Tom Kalor, and Courtney Whitmore. They take the mantle of Starman and continue his legacy. I invite you to listen as I journey through these adventures of all these heroes and the rest of the Starman family here on Opal City Confidential, a Starman podcast, coming February 2023.
Step into the savage world of the Hyborian Age and journey through a land of sorcery, steel, and epic adventure with me, Stephen Orr, on Hither Came Conan. Together we'll explore the legendary Conan the Barbarian comic series from Marvel Comics, starting with the groundbreaking first issue from 1970 and working our way through each epic tale, one issue at a time. Along the way, I'll also dive into any other Conan comics I can get my hands on, because when it comes to the titular Cimmerian, there's no such thing as too much adventure. Whether you're a diehard Conan fan or just discovering the greatest barbarian of all time, this podcast is your gateway to the blood-soaked battlefields, treacherous kingdoms, and forgotten treasures of Robert E. Howard's timeless creation. New episodes are packed with action, insights, and a little humor, all dedicated to the world of Conan and the creators who brought him to life on the comic book page. So sharpen your swords and subscribe to Hither Came Conan today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Crom demands it.
Into the boat!
In a world where there's often 60 plus years of history to worry about, how can you quickly get into a new comic character or franchise? If you're like me, then you turn to video games. But how well does that work out? In some cases, pretty well. In others, it's a giant disaster. But how can you know which games will set you on the right path and which games will just leave you more confused than you were before? Play Comics is the show for you. I'm Chris, and each episode we take a look at video games based on comic properties and how well they stick to that source material. So listen in and get the scoop on which games are worth your time over at playcomics.com or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
And now back to another G.I. Joe podcast. Grunt points out a big building off in the distance that has ventilators on the roof. Hawk says, that must be the ammo dump or armory. Big fans like that are used to vent off fumes from high explosives. Go to page 5, 2300 hours. That's 11 p.m. Grunt and Hawk are in the barracks. They're in their beds, and they're talking shop. They're basically just going over their observations from the day and pointing out various defensive and offensive bits about the camp. Grunt had paced off the intervals between the floodlights, and so they have decided that tomorrow night they'll do a little recon. Next day, 0600 hours, 6 a.m., and they are going through training. They're climbing walls, they're crawling through tunnels, culverts, big pipes. They're swinging across bodies of water. They're fighting with sticks. And at one point, as they're fighting with their sticks, learning combat, defense, and offense, Hawk and Grunt have a little whispered conversation. Hawk says, "Take it easy, Grunt. We don't want to look too good at this." To which Grunt replies, "Sorry, Hawk. I'll try to do worse." Which is kind of funny. Next page, page 6. The men are out for a run. There's a guy standing on a platform yelling at him, "Keep up the pace. 5 more laps around the perimeter wire before breakfast." So they've been doing all this. They haven't even had breakfast yet. They've been climbing walls, crawling through pipes, fighting with sticks, and now running at least 5 laps, more than 5 laps, because they have 5 more left, around the perimeter wire. Haven't even had breakfast yet. Hawk and Grunt, of course, are leading the pack. "We'll check out the armory at 2300 hours tonight. Whew, these other guys are really out of shape," says Hawk. "Yeah, we're holding back as much as we can without being obvious. And we're still leading the pack," says Grunt. Meanwhile, Snake Eyes is in a tree outside the perimeter, and he's watching all this through a pair of binoculars, and he's making some notes. On this page, it's kind of nice. Since Snake Eyes doesn't talk, this is our way to understand what he's thinking, because he's basically journaling it in a field book as he's doing reconnaissance. Snake Eyes recon report, 0645 hours. Observed Hawk and Grunt pretending to be clumsy and slow in a most unconvincing manner. Perimeter too well guarded for daylight penetration. Weakest link in defense is portion of fence directly below flood lamp masts. 4 aircraft on landing strip. 3 F-86 Sabre jet fighters, and 1 fighter apparently undergoing radio repairs. 1 B-29 Super Fortress heavy bomber. Primitive, but is well within nuclear delivery capability. Must infiltrate and confirm nuclear capability. Will penetrate tonight at... Turn the page, and now we're seeing Snake Eyes sneaking into the camp. So we are now moved forward in time, but we're still reading the journal entries. So he's breaking into the camp at 22:30 hours, 10:30 p.m. Route of entry will be at weakest point. Will coordinate wire cutting with highest levels of nocturnal insect noise. And as we're reading that, he is using wire clippers to cut through the wire fence. Must memorize location of entryway to facilitate withdrawal. Will count fence posts between lights. Which is interesting, I guess. I don't know if this much detail needs to go in these notes. I don't. Part of me feels like he's including too much detail. And I know that's for our benefit as the reader. This is a different way for the writer to explain what's going on. What's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. Anyway, this is so we, as the reader, understand how he's doing this, I guess. To me, it feels like Snake Eyes is obviously on the spectrum because he has to note in his notes that he will need to remember to memorize the location of where he came through the fence and that he will count fence posts between the lights. It just seems kind of, obsessive compulsive a bit to write all that down. I know that I make lists of stuff that I need to do, and sometimes by the time I get down to make my list of whatever I need to do for that day, I may have done 2 or 3 items already, and yet I still put them on the list just so I can cross them out. That's what this feels like to me. So we get 2 more panels on this page of Snake Eyes infiltrating the camp.
Main objective, location of nuclear device or devices, if any, unless circumstances yield more profitable intelligence.
So as Snake Eyes is creeping about, he comes across a couple of soldiers who are on their way to a meeting. As they're talking out loud, these 2 soldiers, we learn that Wingfield has called a meeting. They don't know why it's being called so late at night, but it must be important because only the top levels, the top guys, have been invited. Meanwhile, the last 2 panels on this page, we're on page 7 still. It's now 2300 hours because that's when Grunt and Hawk said they were going to sneak out and reconnoiter, check out the place. Basically, they're going to go check out the big building that they think might be an armory. And this is what we see them doing here in the last 2 panels on page 7. Go to page 8. We get 2 panels showing Grunt and Hawk standing outside, hiding, basically. They're behind some barrels, watching the entrance to the big building with the fans on the top that they're going to go investigate. Meanwhile, Snake Eyes has climbed to the top of this other structure so that he can sneak into the attic. Basically, he removes this bit from the roof so he can sneak into this crawl space between the ceiling and the top of the roof. And that way he can spy on the meeting. And we turn the page to page 9, and we learn that this whole idea that Strike First was put together to prepare themselves for an inevitable collapse of civilization. This is where we learn that that's a bit of a pose. While that is true, they are not, or at least Wingfield is not satisfied with waiting for the collapse of civilization. He is ready to bring it about himself. He explains that Cobra had given them 2 nuclear warheads. He also explains in a bit of, I'm sorry, Larry, a bit of, I think, clunky expositional dialogue here. He says, the technicians from Cobra who installed the silent alarm systems that guard our armory have also provided us with 2 nuclear warheads. So I don't think there was any real reason for him to include the bit that Cobra installed their silent alarm system in the armory. I think everybody at that meeting already knows that. Maybe it's just kind of, hey, remember those guys from Cobra? They installed the thing. Remember them? Yeah, well, they gave us 2 nuclear warheads. Really, that's there as a bit of foreshadowing because we know, as a reader, just before this, we know that Hawk and Grunt are going to break into that armory. And now we learn that there's a silent alarm system hidden in the armory. So we're, as a reader, we go, oh no, what's going to happen to Hawk and Grunt? We don't learn right away, though. We don't learn any of that, the fate of Hawk and Grunt on this page at all. Instead, we learn Commander Wingfield's ultimate plan. So they have this big B-29 super fortress bomber, and they're going to load one of the nuclear warheads on it, and they're going to fly to Vladivostok. It's the closest Soviet city that's within range of where that bomber can fly. So they're going to fly there, they're going to drop the bomb, blow up the city, and that will, of course, make the Soviets think that the Americans launched a nuclear warhead, a nuclear strike against the Soviet Union. So they'll launch all their warheads at America. America will see that happen, launch all their warheads at the Soviets, and boom, World War III begins. And Strike First will be there to reclaim civilization for God and the white men, basically. For God and white men. I'm shaking my head. If you can't see that, if you're not watching the video, I'm shaking my head in disdain. He also explains, because he did tell us that they gave them 2, Cobra gave them 2 nuclear warheads. He explains that if something goes wrong with the bombing of Vladivostok, they have buried the second warhead beneath their camp. And it's rigged up to a remote trigger that only Commander Wingfield can use. He's the only one that knows how to set it. He's the only one that knows how to disarm it. And so if the bombing mission fails, he's going to start that timer. The bomb is going to explode. It'll kill all of them because, well, Wingfield at that point, he feels like if the bombing mission fails, then that means something has gone so wrong that the government knows that Strike First was involved, and so they're going to come and arrest him. So by blowing up the nuclear warhead beneath the camp, that too will also start World War III because the Americans will think that the Soviets bombed Montana and then the whole thing starts again. It's obvious that they would prefer for the bombing mission they want that to go swimmingly. That's plan A. Plan B is, all right, at that point, if we have to do plan B, at that point, we're all going to get locked up, and I'm not going to get locked away, so I'll want to die at that point anyway. So it's okay if we all blow up, and the main goal will still go forward, and we just won't be there to clean up the mess. Doesn't make a lot of sense.
There will be dire consequences for you if you do not obey my orders.
Go to page 10. Hawk and Grunt are breaking into the armory. We see them trigger the silent alarm, which is basically just a wire that's running across the floor that one of them steps on. Seems kind of stupid for for an alarm system that you hope somebody will step on this wire. I mean, if it's dark, you're not going to see it. I get that. They didn't see it. It's dark. But there's also the chance that they could just step over it just from their natural walking gait, right? I don't know. Seems kind of silly. Maybe they didn't have the laser eyes like they do nowadays. I don't know. But they step on the wire. It alerts Wingfield that somebody is in the armory. And so he sends everybody in the meeting, he sends them to the armory.
Calamity most foul!
What's funny here is we get the fifth panel on this page, on page 10. It's a silent alarm. We've said that already. And the way they know that the alarm has gone off is that there is a panel on the wall in the back of the room, or actually the front of the room. But so Wingfield would be up on a stage basically in the back of the room, looking toward the front of the room. And there on the wall is this panel with two lights. Each light is labeled. One says armory and one says airfield. And the light for the armory has now started shining. And that's how they know that the alarm has gone off. So they only have two silent alarms in the entire camp, the armory and the airfield. Makes sense. Got to protect their weapons, and the airfield is where the bomber is, and they got to protect their bomber. Page 11, Wingfield is now standing outside, and he's calling for all the soldiers. Surround the armory, secure all exits and windows, first platoon in through the front door. And remember, I want prisoners in condition to answer questions. And so the soldiers rush into the armory. Hawk and Grunt fight back as best they can. And Grunt, I'm telling you what, he ate his Wheaties that morning or that night before they left on their mission. I don't know what Grunt did, but at one point, he picks a guy up over his head, Conan style, and tosses the guy into the other soldiers, knocks him down. And that's like the last two panels on this page. And for some reason, when I'm looking at the last panel and I'm seeing him throwing this guy, and the guy has barreled into the group of soldiers, and they're all being knocked down to the ground, and they put a special effects or sound effect word on here that says slam. But I hear the sounds of pins being knocked down by a bowling ball. Page 12, Hawk and Grunt are overcome just by the sheer numbers of these soldiers that are dogpiling them and beating them. We've seen this scene in, heck, I think it happened in The Mass Device, the first G.I. Joe cartoon miniseries when Cobra captures Duke. It might even be the second one where they capture Duke and Snake Eyes. They all pile on him and they just start beating him. That's weird to see in a cartoon, but we're seeing it here. So they capture Grunt and Hawk. Wingfield decides there's really no reason to interrogate them because the way they fought obviously means that they are some tough hombres, tough some bitches, that whoever sent them, FBI, CIA, whoever, military, sent some of their best men who are not going to crack under interrogation. So there's no point. Instead, they need to move forward with their plan, and it needs to happen that night. And so he tells Carruthers to suit up.
Where's your suit? Just once when I say suit up, I wish you'd put on a suit.
I did, that one time.
It was a blazer.
In the meantime, the last three panels on this page, Snake Eyes is sneaking into their communication shed. There's a guy sitting at the controls with the mic. Snake Eyes comes up from behind him, grabs him by the head, knocks him out, I guess. And then he starts using the telegraph. It's a good thing they had a telegraph. I don't know if maybe the telegraph was a standard piece of equipment, radio equipment back in 1982. You got the microphone and then you got the thing to tap out Morse code. Luckily, they had it since Snake Eyes can't talk or chooses not to talk. We still don't know at this point, but he sends out a message with the dit-dit-dit-dit-dit-dit-dit-doots.
It's Snake Eyes. He's using Joe code Ultra.
Page 13, we're at G.I. Joe headquarters. Breaker is manning the radio, and he gets the incoming message from Snake Eyes, and he responds out loud, G.I. Joe Command Center reading you loud and clear, Snake Eyes. Things must be pretty bad there if you're the one that's calling for help. Ha ha ha! Get it? Because Snake Eyes doesn't talk? Ha ha! Anyway, Dawn arrives in Montana, and Grunt and Hawk are being marched to a pit. Soldiers take him to the edge of the pit. They call it a hole. They tell him to climb on in. Before Hawk and Grunt can do so, however, Snake Eyes, who is hiding up in a tree, drops on top of the other two soldiers, knocking them out. And that's when the three of them, as they're comparing notes, they see the big bomber taking off. Of course, Hawk and Grunt now understand what's going on with the bomber because Snake Eyes explained to them, probably showed him his notes, maybe, I don't know. Hawk was probably looking through his notes and saying, why did you have to write down that you need to memorize where you were going through the fence? Why did you write down that you'd have to count the fence posts? Were you just going to forget? When you got on site and you cut into the fence, did you stop for a second and look at your notes and go, okay, what do I do next? Oh yeah, I have to memorize where this is. How do I do that? Let me look at my notes. Oh yeah, I have to count the fence posts. Why would you do that, Snake Eyes? I don't know if Hawk did that, but regardless, Hawk and Grunt, they understand just as much as Snake Eyes at this point what's going on with the bomber.
Another G.I. Joe podcast will return after these messages.
Across the DC multiverse, countless worlds exist in parallel, each with its own history, its own heroes, its own destiny. I'm DC Dave, and this is Infinite Earths, a guide to the DC multiverse, a travel log and field guide to the worlds beyond the familiar. Each episode, we chart a different Earth, exploring its origins, its defining stories, and the cosmic architecture that shaped it. From the earliest multiverse experiments to the mythic forces that rewrote reality itself, every world has a place on the map. The horror is waiting. Join me. Let's explore.
Are you looking for a podcast that dives into the very beginnings of the Man of Steel? Then check out the Superman Super Show. My name is Steven, and along with Ed Moore, we're just a couple of guys separated by 1,000 miles of geography who like to read comics. Now, we don't claim to be experts on Superman or the golden age of comics, but we're on a mission to read every single Superman story from his earliest adventures, one comic book at a time. And each episode will take you back to the golden age where Superman's journey began. From his first leaps over tall buildings to battling mad scientists and mobsters, we break down every story, sharing our thoughts, insights, and laughs along the way. New episodes drop every 2 weeks. So whether you're a longtime Superman fan or just curious about his roots, we invite you to join us on this incredible journey through comic book history. Find the Superman Super Show wherever you listen to podcasts and start exploring the golden age of Superman with us today.
Maybe I can do a podcast about comic books. No, everybody does a podcast about comic books. Maybe I can do a podcast about TV shows. Nah, there's a lot of podcasts out there covering TV shows. I know, a podcast about movies. It's too general. A lot of people do podcasts about movies. Star Wars movies. No, everybody talks about Star Wars movies. I need to do a podcast that covers movies and television shows and comics and all the pop culture I loved growing up. Wait a minute. The Pop Culture Basement Podcast, hosted by me, Mike Jamison, covering all the pop culture that I consumed and that we consumed during our formative years. Now available on all reputable podcast platforms. Join us down in the basement.
And now back to another G.I. Joe podcast.
Page 14, Hawk tells Grunt and Snake Eyes that he's going to head to the airfield to see what he can do about the bomber. And he tells Grunt and Snake Eyes to head to the armory, keep an eye on Wingfield. Hey, Sleepy Reader has joined us. Hello, Sleepy Reader 666. Thank you for joining us. We're right in the thick of battle as you join us. Anyway, Snake Eyes and Grunt, they're going to the armory. They're under some cover. They're looking at the armory. They feel that it's a little too quiet. They don't know what's going on there. Snake Eyes is going to go in and take a look, and Grunt tells him, give me 2 quick signal shots and I'll lay down cover fire for your withdrawal. 3 shots will be the signal, hold fire. And he's saying this as he's just stepping out into the open. And that's when the people inside the armory start firing on him. He hides behind a big rock, waiting as Snake Eyes is climbing the roof of the building. And as he's laying there, hidden behind this rock, and they're just freaking laying down all kinds of fire on him. Bullets are sping, spang, sping off the rock. And he's saying out loud, hurry up, Snake Eyes. This rock's not going to last much longer. Not with this pounding. Go to page 15. Snake Eyes is on the roof. He's leaning out over the top of the roof, and he's looking through a window, and he can see into the armory, and he can see that it's not just soldiers in the armory. There are the wives and the kids of the recruits and the soldiers as well. And so he pops off 3 quick shots, which is the code, the signal to Grunt, tell him to hold his fire. In the meantime, at the airfield, Hawk manages to steal one of the jets. It just so happens to be the one of the 3 jets that, well, as they put it in the book, someone's starting up the jet that was redlined for radio repair. So Hawk's going after the bomber in a jet with no radio. Page 16, we learn why that's a problem, because Hawk is trying to radio the bomber to explain to them, hey, buddy, we know what you're doing. Don't do it, or I'm going to shoot you down and kill you. But he can't. He can't give him a warning because the radio doesn't work. So at the bottom of this page, page 16, Snake Eyes has come back and is met back up with Grunt behind the rocks. And Grunt says, Snake Eyes, you made it back. I'm sort of glad that nuclear warhead is on a fast plane traveling away from me and not sitting in Montana with us. And, uh-oh, I don't like that look you just flashed me. What does it mean? First of all, I have to try to imagine how Snake Eyes would flash a look at Grunt, because he's got a mask on. You can't see his face. So did he just quickly turn so fast to look at him and then just start shaking his head? I don't know. I don't know what he did. Something obviously to alert Grunt to the fact that what Grunt's talking about may not be right, which means that Snake Eyes, when they were comparing notes, Snake Eyes never explained to them, to Grunt and Hawk, he never told them about the second nuclear warhead that's in the ground beneath them. Sleepy Reader on YouTube asks,
I'm guessing we're looking at Herb Trimpe? Looks like good, clear visual storytelling.
You are correct, sir. Not only did he pencil this issue, he plotted it as well. Turn the page, page 17. Hawk, at this point, he really doesn't have any other choice. He can't warn Carruthers to turn back, so he shoots him down, and Carruthers and the plane go down in the ocean. Hawk is watching as the plane goes down, and he's saying, jump, Carruthers, jump. But by the end of the page, plane's underwater. We never see Carruthers. We have to assume he's dead. Page 18, Commander Wingfield is holding one of those giant walkie-talkies that's 4 times the size of what a walkie-talkie would be nowadays. And his transmission, the line he had going with Carruthers, just went dead. He knows that means that Carruthers must have been shot down, so they have to go with plan B. On his big, giant brick, it's actually bigger than a brick, his walkie-talkie, he also has the controls to start the timer on the bomb that's buried beneath him, and so he does just that. One of the wives of the soldiers comes up to Wingfield at that point. She's got her son with her, who looks like he's probably 10, 12 years old, and she's crying, tears are streaming down her face. She tells Wingfield that he's crazy, what he's doing is crazy, everything about him is crazy, especially that mustache. And she's taking her kid and she's leaving. Carruthers pulls a gun on her. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Wingfield pulls a gun on her. Carruthers doesn't do that. He's dead. He's pulling up a bed in Davy Jones' locker right now. But Wingfield pulls his gun on her, and she's walking away with her son, so he's about to shoot her in the back. No, he says. I'll brook no desertions at our greatest hour. And then he tells her, You're undermining the integrity of our final gesture. 10 minutes from now, nothing will matter anymore. I have no reason not to shoot you. So he's getting ready to plug this woman. He's getting ready to kill her and her son. He doesn't think it's any big deal because they're all going to be dead in 10 minutes anyway when the bomb explodes. So he's as the page ends, he's holding the gun. It looks like he's shaking, and he commands his wife, Sherry, to back him up. And in that final panel, there on page 18, she's starting to pull her gun from the holster that's on her chest. We turn the page, and we have 3 rows of panels, 6 long, tall panels in the first row, and they alternate between Sherry slowly drawing her gun and a helicopter with the other Joes landing in the camp. And then it culminates in panel number 7, one wide panel in the middle row of panels, and we see that Sherry has drawn her gun and she shoots her husband in the back. It's at that time, final panel on the page 19, that the Joes burst into the armory or wherever this is that they're hiding, that all the people are holed up in. And they literally, I don't know what they use to break down the door, but whatever they use, it says crash as the door is just torn into pieces. And Stalker's yelling, "Everyone freeze! Drop your weapons and assume the position now." Go to page 20. Hawk has now arrived, and Sherry tells him about the bomb beneath them. She knows where it's located. She knows how to get it. She just doesn't know how to deactivate it. And so she directs them to where the bomb is. They pull it up out of this pit, basically, and they see that there's 5 minutes left. And so Hawk tells Zap, who is with the Joes that arrived, that it's up to him now. He needs to shut it down. Page 21, Zap is checking out the warhead. He's got like a stethoscope and he's listening to various places. And he tells us what kind of bomb this is and explains kind of how they're going to deactivate it. This is a standard Type 7 warhead with a simple spoken hub detonator. Give me a hand with the nose cover, Snake Eyes. So they take the top of the bomb off. The hub contains U-235 and is held in position by 4 spring-loaded spokes. If it drops, we get critical mass and one mucho big bang. And we can see now inside the bomb, there is like a gold ball with 4 spokes coming off of it. Grunt, it's your job to hold on to that hub and keep it from dropping while I torch through the spokes. You got that, amigo? So basically, Grunt has to hold on to this gold ball. And Zap is going to cut those 4 spokes away from it, which would cause the ball to drop, and that would cause the bomb to explode. But if Grunt can hold it steady, then they can lift the ball out and bang, bomb is diffused. Apparently, the hub, the big ball, is extremely heavy, and as Grunt's really struggling with holding it up, his hands are getting sweaty, the thing's getting slippery, but as we turn to page 22, they are successful. They cut through the spokes. Grunt is able to lift the hub out of the bomb, and they're all saved. This page is also separated into 3 rows of panels. The middle row is just one long, wide panel, and it tells us that we are now later in the story. Hawk is telling Grunt that they did a great job defusing that bomb, that the tech boys from Aberdeen checked out the warhead. They told me that its shielding was intact. You don't have to worry about decontamination or radiation poisoning. Furthermore, he explains, the techs also told me that the timer on the detonator was running fast. It only had 3 seconds left to go when you lifted it clear. Whoa! We didn't see that, which seems silly, I guess. Anytime you watch a TV show or a movie and they're defusing a bomb, we always get to see the countdown. So we can see that it gets to 1 second, and then they shut it off. But the best part of this entire issue is the last panel. As Grunt and Hawk are talking, a couple of guys in a pickup truck drive by, and Grunt says, "Sheesh, I'll bet these locals are sure glad we're on the job." Last panel, we're basically looking through the windshield at the 2 guys in the truck, and they have themselves a quick little conversation as the issue ends. "Well, Clem, looks like they moving in some real soldier boys up to the old Wingfield place. Yep, liquor prices are going to go up, and the sheriff will be setting his speed trap again. Best be keeping a close eye on your women folk, too." The camp, by the way, I don't know if I explained this, the camp was called Camp Victory. Ha ha! The only victory had at that camp was by the good old USA. Anyway, that's the end of the issue. I really quite liked this story. Of the 4 issues that we've looked at so far, only 2 have had Cobra in the issue 1 and issue 3. Issue 2, no Cobra whatsoever. This issue, though, issue 4, is kind of Cobra adjacent because the weapons and the bombs that these militia guys were using came from Cobra. So Cobra was helping them. We never see Cobra. We don't see any Cobra soldiers. We can assume that there are a couple there within the recruits. I'm sure Cobra has a couple of guys there keeping an eye on things, maybe on the down low. But beyond just hearing the name Cobra, we don't get Cobra at all in this issue, which does seem kind of weird, knowing what we know about G.I. Joe. You know, once the cartoon starts, G.I. Joe is all about fighting Cobra, and they've only been fighting Cobra 50% of the time in the series so far. I really enjoy Herb Trimpe's art. It's not always the best on every panel, but as Sleepy Reader pointed out earlier, for those of us on the live stream, he guessed it was Herb Trimpe penciling because these pages look like it's full of clear visual storytelling, which, yeah, that's what you get from HT, Herb Trimpe, Herbie Trimpe, Trimpe Herb. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sorry, guys. The colors of the soldiers' uniforms, though, being kind of a deep violet, like a purple, that's kind of weird. The militiamen, that's, I'm sure that has something to do with the lack of available colors to use at this time when it came to coloring books, but still. And then, of course, the 2 rednecks in the truck at the end just cracked me up. That's my favorite part of the whole issue. But before we wrap it all up, it looks like we have a question here on the YouTube live stream from Sleepy Reader 666, and he asks,
do you know if these early Joe stories are currently in print, in trades, or omnibuses?
Yes, I do. In fact, well, it's way over there in the other room. Now that Image Comics, more specifically Robert Kirkman's Skybound imprint, they now control the license, and they have released these massive paperback collections that are like, I think 50 issues each. I think there might be 3, maybe 4 volumes out at this point. Sleepy Reader also added here in the comments of the live stream, Trimpe was always reliable for a good story. That is true. But yeah, these are collected if you're willing to pay the money, because they're like $50-$60 per collection or something. And then I think you can get, I think there are hardcover versions even, and I think you can buy boxed sets with all the volumes that are like you can get 2 different versions, like a red version, which is the Cobra themed version, and then a blue version, which is the G.I. Joe themed version. All I have is the first collection so far. But the nice thing about the collections, because they're so big, they didn't want to charge too much for them. So the paper is good old comic book newsprint. And so they're really fun to read because they feel like, even though they're awkward to hold in your lap because they're so big, the paper, I love it. It's like reading an old comic. But that, folks, is all I have to say about G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, number 4, Operation Wingfield. What about you? Any questions? Anything you'd like to add? Email me at gijoe@so-many-podcasts.com. And who knows, I may even read it out in a future episode. Alternatively, you can email anothergijoepodcast at gmail.com. In our next episode, Cobra attempts to capture a G.I. Joe Mobat tank during an Armed Forces Day parade. Will they succeed? That's next time when we dive into G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, number 5, Tanks for the Memories, published by Marvel Comics in August of 1982. The synopsis used in this episode comes from marvelfandom.com and contains a few edits and a few rewrites by me. And finally, the views and opinions expressed within this episode are mine and mine alone, and do not reflect the official policy or position of Marvel Comics, Hasbro, or really any other individual, group, or corporation. Except, of course, when they do, which, I'm sure at that point would just be a coincidence. So until next time, folks, keep a sharp eye out for Cobra plots, and as always, be nice to each other. Bye!
I want to thank you for listening to this episode of Another G.I. Joe podcast. Questions and comments can be directed to anothergijoepodcast at gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, you can help to boost our presence online by leaving a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. I also invite you to join our subscription program, Steven or Else Beyond. And in return, you'll get episodes of Another G.I. Joe podcast early and ad-free. Check out the link in the show notes, or just go to SoManyPodcasts.com to sign up today. Another G.I. Joe podcast is a presentation of Steven or Else Media. For more nerdy content hosted by me, check out SoManyPodcasts.com. All links will be in the show notes.
Hello and welcome to another piece of poop. Let's try that again. Larry Hama is credited for providing the script, while Herb Trimpe handled the plotting and the piddles. He handled the piddles. He piddled all over the place. He's also a qualified expert with an M16, the M19 11A1. He's also a good frickin' frickety frick flack flip. He's also a qualified expert. I keep saying expert, like Frankfurt. And we learn that the whole idea behind what Commander Wingfield I'm at a loss. I'm trying to figure out how I wanted to say that. Okay, I'm just going to sit here and think for a minute, guys.
I just don't think I can move through life knowing that a guy named Steven did this to me.
How could you let this happen, Steven?
Steven! Thank God. I had a horrible feeling I was going to be the only one here.
You were saying?
G.I. Joe!